If you have a Bible, let me invite you to take it out, open it up, turn it on, flip with me to Luke's Gospel, chapter 8. Luke chapter 8 as we continue our series, Advent to Easter. And I just want to go ahead and put this out there this morning. It's a little weird because we're talking about a man with a demon problem. And most of us in the room, we don't have a lot of involvement or interaction or experience with the demonic, unless maybe you were peer pressured to watch some cheesy horror movie when you were a teenager. You know nothing about the demonic. I have no involvement with it either, unless you count a couple of the weddings I performed having to deal with bridezillas. You may say, Peyton, no, that's not demon possession. You weren't there. I was praying for an exorcism for sure. I actually think C.S. Lewis is really helpful when we look at passages like this. In his introduction to the Screwtape Letters, he actually says that there are two equal but opposite errors that many people fall into when they think about Satan, when they think about the demonic, when they think about dark spiritual forces. On one side, you've got those that totally deny Satan's existence. They totally reject the idea of an unseen, dark, spiritual realm. They totally reject the idea that there's a demonic present at all. On the other side, though, you've got those people that blame everything bad that ever happens to them on the demonic. Those are the people that wake up in the middle of the night, they stump their toe in the edge of the corner of the bed, and they're like, oh, Satan. And then they go to the bathroom, they're out of toilet paper, it's 2 a.m., they're like Beelzebub, like the people that blame everything on demons and those that blame nothing on demons. And I think that the Bible actually says that the demonic is real. There's a real unseen spiritual dark force. Satan is a liar and he's real, and yet he's not to be blamed for everything, because anything within the demonic is still under the authority, the submission, and the power of Jesus. So let's pick up reading in Luke 8, verse 26. Then they, that's Jesus, his disciples, sailed to the region of the Gerasenes, which is opposite Galilee. When he got out on land, a demon-possessed man from the town met him. And for a long time, he had worn no clothes and did not stay in the house, but in the tombs. And when he saw Jesus, he cried out. He fell down before him, and he said in a loud voice, "What do you have to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, don't torment me." For he had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man. Many times it had seized the man, and though he was guarded, bound by chains and shackles, he would snap the restraints and be driven by the demon into deserted places. "What is your name?" Jesus asked him. "Legion," he said, because many demons had entered him, and they begged him not to banish them to the abyss. A large herd of pigs was there, feeding on the hillside. The demons begged him to permit them to enter the pigs, and he gave them permission. The demons came out of the man, entered the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and drowned. I told you it was going to get weird. When the men who tended them saw what had happened, they ran off and reported it in the town and in the countryside. And the people went out to see what had happened. They came to Jesus. They found the man the demons had departed from sitting at Jesus' feet, dressed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. Meanwhile, the eyewitnesses reported to them how the demon-possessed man was delivered. And then all the people of the Gerasene region asked Jesus to leave them because they were gripped by great fear. So getting into the boat, Jesus returned. The man from whom the demons had departed begged him earnestly to be with him. But Jesus sent him away and said, "Go back to your home and tell all that God has done for you." And off he went, proclaiming throughout the town how much Jesus had done for him. Jesus had been on one side of the Sea of Galilee in the region of the Jews. He had been teaching, performing miracles. But then he got into a boat. He sailed across the Sea of Galilee, which is really just a big old lake. He went through a treacherous storm, all so that he could get to the Gerasene region where the Gentiles live. Because when Jesus came from heaven to earth, wrapped in flesh, born in Bethlehem of the Virgin Mary, he did not just come from one ethnicity. He did not just come to pursue one people group, but to pursue people from all over the nations. And so he gets to the Gerasene region. He gets off the boat, and he makes his way toward the tombs because he has a divine appointment with a man that nobody wants to be around. This is a man that's demonized by many demons. He's so oppressed by the demonic that the man has ripped off all clothing. He's naked. And this is not a cute picture like a toddler who's supposed to be getting in the bath but runs around the living room naked before the bath time. This is not what this is. This is sad. This is gruesome. This is horrible to see this man suffering under such demonic bondage, so much so that he's naked. He's being driven away from his family, driven away from community, and he's living isolated from everyone else in a graveyard of tombs. I don't even like graveyards in the middle of the day. Can you imagine sleeping there night after night after night? Your pillow is a tombstone. I couldn't do it. This guy was awfully oppressed. He was in the pits. He was troubled. This man was terrifying. Mark's gospel tells us that he wasn't just naked living in the tombs, but he was cutting himself with rocks. He was bleeding out, and he would cry out with a loud voice. And all the townspeople, they would warn their children when they sent them off to school, hey, honey, when you come home, make sure you walk the long way around back home. You don't want to go through the graveyard and old naked Nick come after you. You don't want to walk near where that deranged, demon-possessed man can come after you. And yet Jesus walks toward this man. He walks toward him to pursue him. And the man, as we're going to see, recognizes Jesus. Now, I think most of us check out at this point because we're like, well, I live in Killarn. We don't have demons in Killarn. I live in Tallahassee. We don't have demonic activity in Tallahassee. Maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong, but here's the thing that you need to know. In the worldview of the Bible, everyone, apart from the miraculous saving work of Christ, apart from the work of sovereign grace in our lives, everyone is under the domain of darkness. Everyone is succumbing to spiritual powers. Everyone is being tempted and tried by the demonic. This is how Paul says it in Ephesians chapter 2. Right by that good news, by grace you have been saved. This is what he says in Ephesians chapter 2, beginning in verse 1. He says, and you were dead in your trespasses and sins, in which you once walked. We're going to verse 2. Awesome, thank you. And which you previously walked according to the ways of this world, according to the ruler of the power of the air, the spirit now working in the disobedient. We too all previously lived among them in our fleshly desires, carrying out the inclinations of our flesh and thoughts, and were by nature children under wrath, as the others were also. This is what Paul's saying. Before grace, before Christ, before the cross and the resurrection and faith in Jesus, before repentance, everyone is under the domain of darkness. Whether you have a legion of demons inside you or not, everyone is enslaved to someone or something because of the presence of dark spiritual forces and sin. Jesus walks toward this man. But this man who is overcome with all these demons knows who Jesus is, which is mind-blowing. Because the disciples don't even really get who Jesus is. If you look back up in verse 25, before they got onto the bank in the region of the Gerasenes, they were on the Sea of Galilee. There was a storm. The disciples are freaking out. They're terrified. Jesus is sleeping down in the bottom of the boat. They go wake him up. Jesus comes up. He's like, oh, hey, wind, waves, y'all just chill out. And everything goes calm. And the disciples, they can't believe it. And in verse 25, they say, who is this man that even the wind and the waves obey him? And now, fast forward, Jesus meets a demon-oppressed man, and the demons within the man, they know who Jesus is. They cry out, what do you have to do with us, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Have you come to torment us, to destroy us? Please don't punish us. Jesus, what have you to do with us? I think it's incredible. You may not take my word for it that Jesus is the Son of God. You may not be convinced by what I tell you the Bible says. Maybe Pastor Dean can't get it to you either. Maybe you don't trust him either. Maybe you'll believe the demons. Because even the demons understand who Jesus is, that he's God's son, that he is the Son of the Most High God. The problem is, intellectual knowledge is not enough. The demons understand, but according to James chapter 2, verse 19, they understand, they know who God is, and yet they shudder. It is not intellectual knowledge that sets you apart from the demons. It is not intellectual knowledge that brings you deliverance and salvation. It is submission to the authority of Jesus. The demons, they know who he is, but they don't want to submit to his authority. Verse 25, Jesus is commanding these demons come out, which I love. Because in Genesis 1:1, God speaks into the nothingness, and the nothingness obeys, and everything is created. He speaks to the light, and the light is formed. Earlier in the Gospels, Jesus speaks, and a paralyzed man's sins are forgiven, and gets up from a mat and walks and goes home. He speaks, and the wind and the waves obey, and they calm. And now he speaks to the demons, and the demons too have to obey and respond. And we're told even more depressing news about the man. The townspeople would come into the tombs when it seemed like the man was not under their influence, and they would tie up the man with bonds and shackles and chains. But then when the demons would come upon the man would be given such supernatural strength that he could snap the chains. Terrifying. So Jesus asked the man his name, not because he doesn't know, but so that the disciples will know how serious this is, because the man's name is Legion. Meaning it's not just one or two or a few demons, it's a multitude. It's thousands of demons who have come to war against this man. And the demons are begging, oh, Jesus, please don't send us into demon prison. Please don't cast us into the abysses. It's not time. Please don't. And so they look up. And because they're in the Gentile region where pigs are allowed, because this is an area away from the Jewish temple, away from the Jews where this unclean animal is allowed, they see the pigs and they beg Jesus, Jesus, would you not send us into demon prison? Would you let us go into the pigs instead? I told you it's weird. And Jesus is like, okay, why not? So the demons come out of the man. They enter into the herd of pigs. The pigs run down the steep bank. They fall into the lake and they drown. And we're left with all kinds of questions. They fell into the lake. Does that mean that they can come back? Like there are commentaries that are like, well, because they fell into the lake, demons can't pass through water. And so it's like, how do you know that? I have no clue what this is talking about. Here's what I do know. Is people love to complain about the pigs. They're like, how can Jesus be so good and let all these pigs die? According to Mark's gospel, it's 2,000. Maybe he wasn't a fan of bacon. I don't know. But here's what's interesting. Even though like PETA has a field day with this verse, here's what's interesting. In our culture, you'll go to a fancy restaurant and you'll spend high dollar to eat fish eggs. But when it comes to the unborn or the elderly, we're like, we don't care about them. Like that's kind of the culture that we live in, but not so with Jesus. Jesus teaches us that, yeah, he cares for the sparrows. He clothed them in splendor. He cares for the flowers. He gave them beauty. And yet one soul to Jesus is more valuable than a herd of pigs. Jesus isn't trying to say, I don't care about the animals. He created them. He's saying, I care infinitely more about a man who's oppressed and needs healing and salvation and deliverance. You're doubting whether you have any value to Jesus today. You're doubting that he looks at you and has any value or dignity when he sees you. You're wondering. Jesus says, creation is great, but your soul, you is more importantly than all of the rest. And when the farmers, who apparently were hanging out watching this situation, when they saw what happened, they ran off like a bunch of snitches, and they told everybody out in the city and out in the county what had happened. And all the people, they come, and they find the man clothed in his right mind, sitting crisscross applesauce, staring at Jesus. Now, I don't know where the clothes came from. If Jesus could turn water into wine, maybe turn rocks into boxers, I don't know. But the man who had been stripped naked, who was involved in chaos living in the tombs, has now been drawn out of isolation. He's being brought into the presence of Jesus. He's no longer in the tombs. He's no longer cutting himself. He's no longer alienated and isolated. He's no longer possessed. He's no longer naked. He's no longer insane. He's in the presence of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind. And the text says at the end of verse 35, when all the people came and saw the guy now transformed, who had done a total 180, they were afraid. It's incredible. Luke never says the people were afraid when he was being demon possessed. When he was cutting himself, maybe they were afraid, but Luke doesn't say it. When he was living in the tombs, when he was crying out, when he was alienated and living in chaos, the text never says they were afraid then. But now that Jesus changed him, now they're afraid. Because they're like, hold up. If this guy has power and authority over the demons, if he has power and authority over this man, then there is nothing in our life that he doesn't have power and authority over, and they didn't like that. The people who saw what had happened was explaining the whole situation. Okay, well, I was here. I was tending to the pigs. The old naked Nick was hanging out in the tombs like he always does. All of a sudden, there was a boat. A couple Jews got off of it. There was a leader. I think I heard his name was Jesus. He walked toward the graveyard, which is the first sign that I thought this was going to be a weird encounter. And I saw him cast out the demons from this man who entered into a herd of swine, and they ran down the hill and fell in the lake, and they drowned. All of our bacon, all our money, gone. And the people are like, Jesus, you ain't from around here. You need to get back in your boat and head on back across the lake. We don't want you. We don't want your power. We don't want your authority. We don't want whatever you came to bring. We don't want that around here. We need you to leave. And yet the man who had been changed, the man who had been transformed, the man who had been healed, begged Jesus, Jesus, I just want to be with you. I just want to be in your presence. But because Jesus was being told to go, Jesus left these people with a witness. He said, they don't want me here, so here's what I need you to do. Yeah, I want you with me, but the way that you can be with me is by going and telling everyone at your home, everyone around you, what God has done for you. Where you were, how I met you, and how you're different now. That's your story. I need you to go tell it. And the text ends with him obeying. He leaves and he tells everyone in town. He proclaims what Jesus has done. And isn't that supposed to be the flow of our lives as Christians? Like the demon-possessed man had a problem. He was delivered. The deliverance he experienced created a desire for intimacy with Jesus. As he was intimate, close with Jesus, Jesus gave him a mission, and then he obeyed the mission because he had experienced such incredible deliverance. Isn't that supposed to be the ebb and flow of the Christian life? That we have a problem, sin. And yet Jesus delivers us from that problem through his death and resurrection. That should create within us a desire to be close to Jesus. And yet Jesus says, here's how you get close to me. You go on mission and you tell others about what I have done for you. And then we say, yes, Jesus. Not, hey, actually, I've got 4.3 reasons and some sub-points about why I can't do this right now. I'm an introvert. I'm an Enneagram, whatever. Like, I can't do this right now. No. We just simply obey what it is that Jesus tells us to do. That's the normal ebb and flow. I think it's beautiful. Now, here's where I think we mess up reading the Gospels, okay? When we read the Gospels, we normally read a story and then internally we ask the question, where am I in the story? We're like, am I the paralyzed man or am I one of the four friends? You know, like here, we're like, am I a farmer, a pig? Like the demons, like where am I? We're always looking for ourselves. Here's newsflash, the Bible ain't about you. It's for you, not about you. The Bible's ultimately about Jesus from beginning to end, which means in the Gospels, rather than us reading a story like this, trying to find ourselves or trying to find like everything you ever want to know about demons from this text, instead, why don't we look at who Jesus is and what he's done? That's what this text is about. So that's where I want us to kind of end up. I want to show you first, I want you to think about the pursuit of Jesus. That's right, the pursuit of Jesus. Running after sinners, pursuing the broken with his love. The text begins with Jesus leaving the comfort of his homeland, the comfort of people who look like him, think like him, and most of them grew up just like him, to go across the sea to encounter a group of people that the Jews deemed unclean. He went out into the Roman territories, not to overthrow them like the Jews wanted, but to rescue them. Then when he got off the boat, rather than saying, hey, y'all got any good restaurants around here, he walked to the tombs. He went to the man nobody wanted to be around. He went to the unwanted. He went to the unloved. And isn't that what Jesus does? He pursues the unlovable. He pursues the broken, the outcast, the alienated, the isolated. He pursues those that nobody wants because he creates you and he sees you with value. He wants you. He wants your worship. He wants you to experience freedom and forgiveness. He comes after us. We run from him. He runs toward us. And yet, isn't it the bookend to the story too? At the very end of the story, the people, they don't want Jesus around them. They're like, hey, you ain't from around here, get to stepping. And so Jesus tells the man who's been healed, hey, they don't want me here. So rather than you getting in the boat with me, I'm going to leave you here as a witness, because though they don't want me, I want them. I need you to tell them about me when I leave. This whole story is bracketed by the pursuit of Jesus for the broken, the unwanted, the unlovable, the outcast, because that's who Jesus is. He comes after sinners like us. It's pretty good news. Second, I want you to think about the faithfulness of Jesus. You see, the Bible story begins with a man, Adam, a woman, Eve, enjoying a beautiful, delightful garden in the presence of God. And yet everything goes sideways when a serpent, according to the book of Revelation, Satan himself, the king and prince of demons, enters into the garden, tempts the man, tempts the woman. They eat the forbidden fruit from the forbidden tree and invite the curse of sin and death and brokenness into God's good creation. And when God comes into the garden, yes, he passes punishment down to Adam. He passes discipline down to Eve, absolutely. But he also gives good news. He looks at the serpent in Genesis 3:15. He looks into the eyeballs of Satan and says, one day a child will be born, and though you will strike his heel, he will crush your head. And that ultimately, of course, happens on the cross. When Satan thinks he's got Jesus, he's got him nailed, he's got him dead. But then on the third day at the break of dawn, Jesus walks out of the grave on the other side and delivers the death blow to Satan. But this story where Jesus is casting out the demonic, where he's removing the spiritual darkness in this man's life, it's a foreshadow. It's a taste. It's to let us know that though you look around and think this world is impacted by evil, evil's going to win the day. Even though you may be tempted to think there's no way that darkness is not going to win out. Though you may feel that oppression will always have its day, this story reminds us that the serpent crusher is on the move. Like this story is showing us that God will be faithful to his promises, that evil will not have the final word, that darkness will not win, that Satan and the demonic one day will go to the abyss. And on that day, Jesus will stand as the faithful king. Third, I want you to think, maybe most importantly, about the power of Jesus. I mean, the whole gospel of Luke This whole Advent to Easter series is demonstrating the power of Jesus. We see his power in healing the paralyzed man, forgiving his sins, healing sickness. We see his power and his authority and being able to calm the wind and the waves. We see his power and authority here over the demons. And you should be thinking, if Jesus has power to heal a man like this, old naked Dick, crazy and possessed by thousands and thousands of demons, cutting himself, crying out in a loud voice, breaking bonds and shackles with his demonic strength. If Jesus has the power over him, what can't he do for you? You think depression is going to have the last word in your story? You think you're never going to be able to give up your addiction to pornography? You think you're never going to be able to get control on that temper or to put the bottle down or quit giving yourself into intoxicating drugs? You think you're so far gone that Jesus can't come after you? Look at his power. Look at what he did for this man. And you're like, yeah, but I'm not possessed by demons. I'm possessed by pornography. Well, here's the thing. Whether you have demons or not, Jesus is showing his power over anything that controls or shackles you. Because it's all the same. Anything that enslaves you, you'll be broken down physically going after it. You'll be broken down mentally with discouragement that you can't master it. You'll be broken down financially, try to kick it or try to feed it. And in the end, whether you're demon possessed or not, the power of Jesus says, no one is too far gone for me. The problem is some people, they don't like his power because they're threatened by it. You know the people that are threatened by the power of Jesus? The people who think they have all the power. You know the people that are threatened by the power of Jesus? The people who think they hold all the cards. Some of these townspeople are like, oh, Jesus, we've seen your power. We don't want you here because that freaks us out. We're not sure we're ready to give up anything. But do you know the people who love the power of Jesus? It's people like this man who know they don't have power within themselves to fix themselves, who know they're too broken to do anything about it on their own, who come to an end of themselves and say, I have nothing but sin and brokenness and devastation to offer. It's those people who love the power of Jesus. Those are the people who've experienced being set free, who've experienced liberation and forgiveness and freedom. Like those are the people that love the power of Jesus, just like this man. You and I need the power of Jesus if we're to do a 180. We need the power of Jesus if we're to give up our sin problem. We need the power of Jesus to break through the bonds of the demonic. But will you be someone that's like, nah, I don't really like the power of Jesus, I find it threatening? Or will you be someone like this man who was magnetized to it? Which is why, fourth, I just want to briefly talk about the reaction to Jesus. Sure, there were some who had a terrible negative reaction to Jesus. They were like, we don't want anything to do with you. But then there was this one man who would experience such deliverance from the demonic. All he wanted to do was be with Jesus. And then Jesus was like, okay, I want you to be with me too, but physically, I've got to go here. I need you to stay right here. But I want you to live on mission and declare what I've done for you so that these people may be freed from whatever is binding them, whatever's enslaving them, whether it's demons or alcoholism or you name it, whatever it is, so that they would experience salvation and deliverance. And this man was like, okay, I'll do it. And isn't that supposed to be how we react? If we've experienced his power and tasted his grace, all we want to do is be close to Jesus. Whether it means sitting at his feet, crisscross applesauce with our fists under our chin, or whether it means living on mission and proclaiming the powerful works of God. Isn't this supposed to be our reaction? The church I used to pastor, multi-generational church, I used to say this and they understood what I meant. Maybe you won't, but I'm going to say it to you anyway. Some of y'all have been saved too long. And here's what I mean by that. Some of us have been forgiven of our sins for so long, we don't remember what we were saved from. or we've forgotten what God saved us and protected us from ever experiencing. But if you would just take an afternoon, maybe this afternoon, and remember who you used to be, I think when you gaze at his grace, all you're going to want to do is be close to him. And finally, I want to just briefly highlight the substitution of Jesus. You ever ask the question at the end of the story, how does Jesus ultimately overcome evil? Like, I get it. He put the demons into the pigs. They drowned, but they were worried about going into the abyss. Like, how does that ever happen? Like, how is Satan and the demonic ever punished? How is evilness ever overthrown? Like, how is the darkness, how is the victory ever won over it? And the answer is the substitution of Jesus. Here's what I mean. In this story, we're introduced to a man who was naked and isolated, cutting himself, crying out, living among the tombs. He's shackled, and yet he keeps breaking the chains. But at the end of the Gospel of Luke, we're going to see that Jesus swaps places with this man. Because at the end of the Gospel of Luke, it's going to be Jesus who's stripped naked. It's going to be Jesus who is isolated and nailed to a tree all by himself. Disciples having scattered. It's going to be Jesus who's bleeding and crying out. It's going to be Jesus who's placed not just among the tombs, but is placed in the tomb and sealed with a rock. It's going to be Jesus who's going to be shackled with death. But then on the third day, a group of women are going to make their way to the tomb, and the rock's going to be rolled away, and they're going to find out that this Jesus, who was nailed to a tree, stripped naked, bleeding, crying out, abandoned, this Jesus would break the shackles of death, and he would walk out of the tomb on the other side. How do we know that darkness won't win? How do we know that evil and Satan and punishment and darkness won't win? Because Jesus voluntarily takes it upon himself and is nailed to a tree and bleeds out and dies in our place. So that we, who were enslaved to sin, might have our bonds broken so that we can experience freedom. But it only happens through the reversal. It only happens through Jesus stepping into our place. Let's pray.